is there weirdnesses to your own sleep schedule as a scientist that does incredible work, has a lot of things going on, has to lead research, has to write research, has to be a science communicator, also have a social life, all those kinds of things. Is there certain patterns to your own sleep that you regret, or you participate in, that you find you enjoy? Like, is there some like personal stuff, quirks, or things you're proud of that you do in terms of your sleep schedule?
The funny thing about being a sleep researcher is that it doesn't make you immune
Right.
to the ravages of a difficult night of sleep. And I have battled my own periods of insomnia in my life too. And I think I've been fortunate in ways because I know how sleep works and I know how to combat insomnia. I know how to get it under control. Because insomnia in many ways is a condition where all of a sudden your sleep controls you rather than you control your sleep.
Wow. Yeah. That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah.
And I know when I'm starting to lose control and it's starting to take control. And I understand how to regain. But it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time.
So you've struggled with insomnia in your life?
I have. Not all of my life. I would say I've probably had 3 or 4 really severe bouts, and all of them usually triggered by, emotional circumstances, by stress.
Stress that's connected to actual events in life, or stress that's unexplainable?
All externally triggered. Yeah. It's sort of what we would call reactive stress. And so that's sort of point number 1 about the idiosyncrasies. The point number 2 is that when you are having a difficult night of sleep, as a sleep researcher, you basically have become the Woody Allen neurotic of the sleep world. Because at that moment, I'm trying to fall asleep and I'm not. And I'm starting to think, okay, my dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is not shutting down. My noradrenaline is not ramping down. My sympathetic nervous system is not giving way to my parasympathetic. At that point, you are dead in the water for the next 2 hours and nothing is bringing you back. So there is some irony in that too. I would say for myself, though, if there is something I'm not proud of, it has been at times railing against my chronotype. So your chronotype is essentially, are you a morning type, evening type, or somewhere in between?
Yeah.
And there were times, because society is desperately biased towards the morning types, this notion of the early bird catches the worm. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's true, but I'll also tell you that the second mouse gets the cheese.
Yeah.
So I think one of the issues
that's a good line. Yeah.
Around, is firstly, people don't really understand chronotype, because I'll have some people when I'm sort of out in the public, they'll say, look, I struggle with terrible insomnia. And I'll ask them, is it problems falling asleep or staying asleep? And they'll say falling asleep. And then I'll say, look, if you are on a desert island with nothing to wake up for, no responsibilities, what time would you normally go to bed and what time would you wake up? And they would say, I'd probably like to go to bed about midnight and wake up maybe 8 in the morning. And then I'd say, so what time do you now go to bed? And they'd say, well, I've got to be up for work early, so I get into bed at 10. I'd say, well, you don't have insomnia. You have a mismatch between your biological chronotype and your current sleep schedule. Mm-hmm. And when you align those two, and I was fighting that for some time too. I'm probably mostly right in the middle. I am desperately vanilla, unfortunately, in many aspects of life. But this included, I'm neither a strong morning type nor a strong evening type. Mm-hmm. So ideally, I'd probably like to go to bed around, 11, 10:30, 11, probably somewhere between 10:30 and 11, and wake up. I naturally wake up usually most days before my alarm at 7:04. And it's 7:04 because why not be idiosyncratic in terms of setting an alarm?
I love it.
And so
that's kind of awesome. I've never heard about that. That's amazing. I'm going to start doing that now, setting alarms like a little bit off the
yeah, I know. I'm never quite sure why
it's a celebration of uniqueness.
Yeah, and I am quite the odd snowflake in that sense too. So I would usually then try to force myself, because I had that same mentality that if I wasn't up at, 6:30 and in the gym by 7, that there was something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly abandoned that. But if I look back, if there was a shameful act that I have around my sleep, I think it would be that for some years, until I really started to get more detailed into sleep. And now I have no shame in telling people that, I will probably usually wake up around 6:45 naturally, sometimes 7, when people are looking at me thinking, you're a sloth, you're lazy. And I don't finish my daily workout until, I'm not working until probably 9 o'clock in the morning. They're thinking, what are you doing? Now, I will work late into the day. If I could, I would work 16 hours. It's my passion, just like yours. So I don't feel shame around that, but I have changed my mentality around that.
It's complicated because I'm probably happiest going to bed at, if I'm being honest, like at 5 a.m.
That's fine. You're just an extreme evening type.
But the problem is, it's not that I'm ashamed for it. It's I actually kind of enjoy it because I get to sleep through all the nonsense of like the morning and the.
Isn't that a beautiful thing?
Like people are busy with their emails and I just am happy as a cow.
Yeah,
and I wake up after all the drama has been resolved.
Yeah, and cows are happy, and the drama has been resolved.
Exactly. Yeah. So but in society, you do, especially. I mean, this is what I think about is. When you work on a larger team, especially with companies, you are, everybody's awake at the same time. So that's definitely been a struggle to try to figure out, just like you said, how to balance that, how to fit into society and yet be optimal for your chronotype. You said,
yeah, to sleep in synchrony with it and harmony, because normally what we know is that if you fight biology, you'll normally lose.
Yeah.
And the way you've lost is through disease and sickness.
You said you suffered through several bouts of insomnia. Is there, aside from embracing your chronotype, is there advice you can give how to overcome insomnia from your own experience?
Right now, the best method that we have is something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI for short. And you work with, for people who don't know what it is, you work with a therapist for maybe 6 weeks, and you can do it online, by the way. I would recommend probably jumping online. It's just easiest. And it will change your beliefs, your habits, your behaviors, and your general stress around this thing called sleep. And it is just as effective as sleeping pills in the short term. But what's great is that, unlike sleeping pills, when you stop working with your therapist, those benefits last for years later. Whereas when you stop your sleeping pills, you typically have what's called rebound insomnia, where your sleep not only goes back to being as bad as it was before, it's usually even worse. Mm-hmm. For me, I think I found a number of things effective. The first is that I had to really address what was stressful and try to come up with some degree of meaningful rationality around it. Because I think one of the things that happens, there's something very, talking about conscious states, to come all the way back to, I don't know. I feel like we've only been chatting for like 20 minutes, but you're going to tell me it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Okay, I feel terribly sorry. But let's come back to conscious states, which is where we started.
Yeah.
There is something very strange about the night, that thoughts and anxieties are not the same as they are in the waking day. They are worse, they are bigger. And I at least find that I am far more likely to catastrophize and ruminate at night about things, that when I wake up the next day in the broad light of day, I think, it's nowhere near that bad, Matt. What were you doing? It's not that bad at all. Yeah. So to gain, firstly, some rational understanding of my emotional state that's causing that insomnia was very helpful. Yeah. The second thing was to keep regularity, just going to bed at the same time, waking up. And here's an unconventional piece of sleep advice. Mm-hmm. After a bad night of sleep, do nothing. Don't wake up any later. Don't go to bed any earlier. Don't nap during the day. And don't drink any more coffee than you would otherwise. Because if you end up sleeping later into the morning, you're then not going to be tired at your normal time at night. So then you're going to get into bed thinking, well, I had a terrible night of sleep last night. And yes, I slept in this morning to try and compensate, but I'm still going to get to bed at my normal time. But now you get into bed and you haven't been awake for as long as you normally would. So you're not as sleepy as you normally would be. And so now you sit there lying in bed and it's another bad night. Yeah. And the same thing is, if you go to bed any earlier, so don't wake up any later, wake up at the same time, don't go to bed any earlier, because then you're just probably your chronotype, your biological rhythm doesn't want you to be asleep. And you think, well, it's a terrible night. I'm going to get into bed at 9 p.m. rather than my standard 10. You're just going to be lying in bed awake for that hour. Naps are a double-edged sword. They can have wonderful benefits, and we've done lots of studies on naps for both the brain and the body. But they are a double-edged sword in the sense that napping will just take the edge off your sleepiness. It's a little bit like a valve on a pressure cooker. When you nap during the day, you can take some of that healthy sleepiness that you've been building up during the day. And for some people, not all people, but for some people, that can then make it harder for them to fall asleep at night and then stay asleep soundly across the night. So the advice would be, if you're struggling with sleep at night, don't nap during the day. But if you are not struggling with sleep and you can nap regularly, naps are just fine. And we can play around with optimal durations depending on what you want. Just try not to nap too late into the day, because napping late into the day is like snacking before your main meal. Yeah. It just takes the edge off your sleep hunger, as it were. But that would be, so that's my unconventional second piece of advice regarding insomnia. The third is meditation. I found meditation to be incredibly powerful. I started reading about meditation as I was researching that aspect of the book many years ago. And as a hard-nosed scientist, I thought, this sounds very woo-woo. This is sort of, we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and everything's going to be fine with sleep. I read the data and it was compelling. I couldn't ignore it. And I started meditating, and that was 6 years ago, and I haven't stopped. And I find meditation before bed incredibly powerful. The meditation app companies were perplexed at this at first. They want people to meditate during the day. But when they looked at their usage statistics, they found that they would have people in the morning meditating. And then there's a huge number of people using the meditation app in the evening. What they were doing was self-medicating their insomnia. And they finally, rather than railing against it, they started to see it as a cash cow. Rightly so.
Yeah.
So I found meditation to be helpful. Having a wind down routine is the other thing that's critical for me. I can't just go because when my mind is switched on, and I think you may be like this too, if I get into bed, that Rolodex of thoughts and information and excitement and anxiety and worry is just whirling away, and it's not going to be a good night for me. So I have to find a wind down routine. And that makes sense when you realize what sleep is like. Sleep is not like a light switch. Sleep is much more like trying to land a plane. It takes time to descend down onto the terra firma that we call sound sleep at night. And we have this for kids. I don't have children, but, a lot of parents will say, we have to have the bedtime routine. You bathe the kid, you put them in bed, you read them a story. You have to go through this routine, this wind down routine for them, and then they fall asleep wonderfully. Why do we abandon that as adults? We need that same wind down routine. So that's been the other thing that's been very helpful to me. So don't do anything different. If you have a bad night of sleep, keep doing the same thing. Manage your anxiety, understand it, rationalize it. Then meditation, and then finally having some kind of disengagement, wind down routine. Those are the four things that have been very helpful to me.